Imagine a world where being born into one faith could mean a life of persecution, and changing that faith could lead to a life of exile. This is the story of Immanuel Tremellius, a man who lived through such times and whose journey from Judaism to Calvinism is a tale of survival, scholarship, and profound impact on the Reformation era. Immanuel Tremellius was born around 1510 in Italy into a Jewish family. Growing up, he mastered Hebrew, a skill that would later define his career. But the world he lived in was not kind to Jews. Anti-Semitic sentiments were rampant, and Jews were often forced to live in ghettos or face expulsion. Despite these challenges, Tremellius's early life was marked by a deep engagement with Jewish texts and traditions. However, Tremellius's life took a dramatic turn when he converted to Christianity. This was not a simple decision. It meant leaving behind his family, his community, and his homeland. He became a Christian, but not just any Christian. He aligned himself with the Reformed branch of Protestantism, a movement that was gaining momentum across Europe. This conversion was a double-edged sword. On one hand, it offered him a new community and a chance to pursue his scholarly interests. On the other hand, it made him a target of suspicion and scrutiny, as converts were often viewed with distrust. Tremellius's journey into exile began soon after his conversion. He fled Italy and sought refuge in various parts of Europe, where he found a community of like-minded individuals who valued his skills and knowledge. His expertise in Hebrew and his deep understanding of the Old Testament made him a valuable asset to the Reformed Church. He began teaching at prestigious institutions, including the University of Cambridge and the University of Heidelberg, where he became a respected professor of Hebrew and Old Testament studies. Tremellius's most significant contribution to the Reformation was his translation of the Old Testament into Latin. This work, known as the Testamentii Puris Biblia Sacra, was a monumental achievement. It was one of the most accurate and influential translations of its time, and it helped to spread the Reformed understanding of the Bible across Europe. His translation was widely used and reprinted, ensuring that his legacy lived on long after his death in 1580. But Tremellius's story is not just about his scholarly achievements. It is also a story of resilience and adaptation. He navigated a world where religious identity was a matter of life and death, and he managed to thrive despite the odds. His life provides a unique window into the complexities of religious conversion and the dynamics of the Reformation. It challenges the notion that the Reformed Church was a monolithic entity and highlights the diversity of individuals who contributed to its development. Tremellius's journey from Judaism to Calvinism is a testament to the human capacity for change and the enduring power of scholarship. His life and works continue to offer valuable insights into the religious and intellectual landscape of the 16th century, a time of great upheaval and transformation. Writings about Tremellius over the years have had three main traits. First, people have known the main points of his life, which was very complex. His many jobs and moves around Europe have been a key part of these stories. Second, there have been a lot of mistakes and missing details in these writings. This is because the older accounts that newer ones are based on had flaws. Third, most people agree that Tremellius was very skilled and important, but no one has gone into much detail about why. There are a few reasons why Tremellius hasn't been studied much. He moved around a lot, so no one country claims him as their own. He was born a Jew in Italy, but became a Christian, and worked mostly in Protestant areas of Europe. This made it hard for historians to focus on him. Also, he could speak many languages, which makes it tough for researchers to study all his work. Tremellius himself made it hard to study him. He didn't write much about himself and avoided talking about controversial topics. He kept a low profile to stay safe, especially because of his religious changes. This means there's not much information about him, making it harder for historians to write about him. A new biography of Tremellius is needed because there are no detailed, modern studies of his life. There are many errors in the existing accounts, and these need to be corrected. The new study will use a wide range of original sources to provide a more accurate and comprehensive account of his life. Tremellius's life is a good example of the 16th century. He lived for 70 years, which was longer than most people at the time. He traveled a lot, which was common for people who had to move for religious reasons. His life was shaped by two major movements, the Renaissance and the Reformation. The Renaissance was a time when people were interested in ancient cultures and languages. Tremellius benefited from this because he learned Latin, Greek, and Hebrew, which were important for studying ancient texts. The Renaissance also led to more schools and universities, which helped Tremellius in his career as a teacher. The Reformation was a time of religious change. When Tremellius converted from Judaism to Christianity, he had many choices of which type of Christianity to follow. This was different from earlier times when there were fewer options. The Reformation also made Hebrew studies more important because people wanted to understand the Bible better. This made Tremellius's skills more valuable, and he had more job opportunities. Anti-Semitism was a big issue during Tremellius's time. Jews faced a lot of hostility and were often forced to convert to Christianity or leave their homes. Tremellius, being a convert, faced suspicion from both Christians and Jews. However, he managed to avoid the worst of this by being careful and having influential friends. Recent research has helped us understand the religious environment in Italy before the Council of Trent. Historians have shown that there were many different ideas about religious reform in Italy, and these ideas influenced Tremellius. His early life in Italy, where he was exposed to these ideas, shaped his later career. Understanding this context is important for understanding Tremellius's life and work. Recent studies in history have helped us understand more about Immanuel Tremellius's life and the world he lived in. One area is Judaic studies, which has gained more attention since World War II. This has led to a better understanding of Jewish life and culture, not just through the eyes of Christians, but on its own terms. Historians have also shown that the relationship between Christians and Jews was more complex than just hostility. There were areas of cooperation and influence, especially in scholarship. This helps explain Tremellius's own journey from Judaism to Christianity and the mixed reactions he received from his Christian peers. Another area that has received more attention is education in the late medieval and early modern periods. Historians have started to look at the broader picture of education, not just focusing on famous educators. This includes understanding the content, form, and impact of education during this time. The Renaissance and Reformation emphasized the importance of education, and this is relevant to Tremellius's career as he was involved in teaching at various levels. A third area is the study of Protestantism, particularly the Reformed religion. Historians have moved away from simply calling it Calvinism, and now use Reformed to reflect the broader influences beyond John Calvin. They have also explored the international aspects of the Reformed movement, such as the role of correspondence, migration, and financial support. This helps us understand the Reformed churches in both their national and international contexts. Tremellius, who lived in several different countries and was a key figure in the Reformed Church, provides valuable insights into these themes. These historical developments are important for understanding Tremellius's life and career. His biography can shed light on broader issues of the early modern period, such as the role of patronage, the nature of education, and the complex relationships between different religious groups. By studying Tremellius, we can challenge some of our assumptions about the 16th century and gain a deeper appreciation of the diversity and importance of scholarly activities during the Reformation. Since the 1800s, people have generally thought that Tremellius was born in 1510. However, this isn't certain. The only clue we have is from a manuscript written after Tremellius died in 1580. The author guessed that Tremellius was about 70 years old when he died. This idea was repeated in a book from 1618. Over time, this guess became accepted as fact, but it might not be accurate. Tremellius could have been born a few years before or after 1510. Interestingly, he was around the same age as John Calvin, who was born in 1509, and they even met a few times. We do know that Tremellius was born in Ferrara, a city in Italy. He often referred to himself as Ferrariensis, which means from Ferrara. Ferrara was a big city with around 40,000 to 50,000 people. It was located near the River Po and was close to other important cities like Bologna, Padua, and Venice. This made Ferrara a key place for trade and commerce, which helped it grow into a wealthy and culturally rich city during the Renaissance. Ferrara was ruled by the d'Este family, who turned it from a small town into a beautiful and important city. They built many palaces, churches, and other buildings. One of their biggest projects was the Terra Nova, a new part of the city that added a lot of space and reflected Renaissance ideas of design. By the time Tremellius was born, Ferrara was known for its impressive architecture and vibrant cultural life, with music, poetry, and art being a big part of daily life. Tremellius was born into a Jewish family. Although Ferrara didn't have a formal Jewish ghetto until 1627, he likely grew up in a Jewish neighborhood. Jews in Europe faced a lot of discrimination and were often forced to wear special clothing to distinguish them from Christians. Many Jews were expelled from different parts of Europe, especially in the 1400s and 1500s. This made life difficult for Jews, and they were often seen as outsiders. In Italy, the situation was a bit better, but still not perfect. Ferrara was one of the more tolerant places for Jews. The d'Este family allowed Jews to live in the city and even gave them some privileges like not having to wear the yellow badge. However, there were still tensions. Some people resented the Jews because they were money lenders, and there were occasional outbreaks of violence. The d'Este family tried to protect the Jews, but it was a delicate balance. Ferrara's Jewish community was diverse with people from different parts of Europe. Tremellius could have been from any of these groups, but we don't know for sure. Despite the challenges, Ferrara was a place where Tremellius could grow up and experience the richness of the Renaissance, which likely influenced his later life and his decision to convert to Christianity. The relationship between Christians and Jews in Ferrara was not always smooth. In the 1470s and 1480s, tensions were high, but things got better after that. However, when new Jewish people came from Spain in 1492 and from Germany in 1510, the old tensions started to come back. This meant that life for a Jewish person like Tremellius in Ferrara was a mix of good and bad experiences. The d'Este family, who ruled Ferrara, were generally nicer to Jews than other rulers, but their policies changed depending on different pressures. Jews were needed for their money-lending skills, but this role was often looked down upon. Even though they weren't forced into a ghetto, Jews were still seen as different and sometimes faced abuse from Christians. Tremellius's family is a mystery. Some people think his dad might have been a doctor, but there's not much evidence for this, since Ferrara had a lot of Jewish bankers. It's also possible that Tremellius came from a banking family, but we don't know for sure. In a letter, Tremellius mentioned that he was reunited with his brother after 24 years, but he never talked about his family in his writings or letters. This could mean he was sad about being separated from them, or he might have wanted to distance himself from his past. When Tremellius was a kid, he probably learned Hebrew in some unique ways. Some people say his teacher wrote the Hebrew alphabet and short Bible quotes in honey on a blackboard, or painted them on eggshells. These methods were common in Jewish communities in Northern Europe, but they were becoming less popular by the late 1400s and early 1500s. We don't know if Tremellius experienced these methods, but they show that Jewish education was often creative and engaging. As he grew older, Tremellius moved on to more advanced studies. He learned Hebrew, Latin, and Greek, making him a trilingual scholar. This was a big deal in the Renaissance. If he was like other Jewish kids in Ferrara, he might have gone to the local Jewish school. One of the teachers there was Abraham ben Mordecai Pharisal, who was known for his expertise in Jewish and Christian texts. Pharisal taught a range of subjects, including grammar, writing, and logic. He emphasized the importance of simplicity and concentration in teaching and believed in using fear to help students learn. Pharisal was well versed in both the Old and New Testaments and was knowledgeable about Jewish and Christian literature. He even argued with the French humanist François Tissard about the interpretation of biblical texts. Tissard praised Pharisal for his deep understanding of both Judaism and Christianity. If Pharisal was Tremellius's teacher, it's likely that he influenced Tremellius's later interest in the Bible and his ability to integrate Jewish and Christian ideas. Ferrara was an important city for the Catholic Church. It hosted a church council in 1438 that aimed to reunite Roman Catholicism with the Eastern Orthodox Church. The d'Este family had strong ties to Rome, and the city had a significant Jewish community. However, the d'Este were sometimes lenient with the Jews, which was unusual for the time. In the late 1400s, Duke Urco became more devoted to the church, influenced by the preacher Girolamo Savonarola. Urco built and renovated many churches and passed laws against blasphemy and sodomy. The Protestant Reformation also had a big impact on Ferrara. The works of Erasmus and Luther were widely read in the city. In 1528, Renée of France, who was sympathetic to religious reform, married Ercole II and brought her own court to Ferrara. Her court became a haven for religious dissidents, including Clement Marot and John Calvin. Calvin spent time in Ferrara in 1536, and his ideas spread through the city. Tremellius's early life in Ferrara was shaped by these religious and cultural changes. The d'Este family's relatively tolerant attitude towards Jews and the presence of influential teachers like Pharisal might have helped Tremellius develop a more positive view of Christians. The intellectual movements of the Renaissance and the Reformation were also happening around him, and these events likely influenced his later decision to convert to Christianity. Tremellius lived with his family in the Jewish community of Ferrara until at least 1530. By mid-1542, he felt he had to leave Italy and move to Northern Europe. The years between 1530 and 1542 were very important for Tremellius, but we don't have a lot of details about what happened during this time. Many people think Tremellius went to Padua to study the classics at the university. This makes sense because he was very educated, and Padua was known for being friendly to Jewish students. However, we don't have any solid proof that he actually went to Padua. Ferrara and Rome were also places where he could have studied. Some historians believe Tremellius spent the whole decade of the 1530s in Padua. But there are reasons to think this might not be true. For example, it's possible he spent time in Rome. Also, in 1559, Tremellius mentioned he hadn't seen his brother in 24 years, which suggests he might have been back in Ferrara around 1535. As a Jew, Tremellius wouldn't have been allowed to formally enroll in a university or get a degree. So, even if he did study at a university, it wouldn't have been officially recorded. This makes it hard to know for sure where he spent his time. During these years, Tremellius was exposed to many religious and intellectual ideas. Understanding these ideas is important to figure out why he eventually converted to the Reformed faith. His journey was not common, but it can still be explained by looking at the influences he faced. Tremellius's conversion from Judaism to Reformed Protestantism was a significant event in his life. Conversions in the early modern period were often described as sudden dramatic moments, like St. Paul on the road to Damascus or St. Augustine in his Confessions. However, scholars have shown that these accounts are often simplified or even fictional, meant to inspire followers. In reality, conversions were usually a gradual process. This seems to be true for Tremellius as well. Two main sources provide information about Tremellius's conversion. The first is from a book called Specularius contra Genebrardum, a dialogue between Tremellius and Gilbert Genbrard. In this dialogue, Tremellius says he was taken into the household of Cardinal Alessandro Farnese, who later became Pope Paul III. When he first converted to Christianity, Farnese helped him understand Christian doctrine. The second source is from De Antiquitate Britannicae, a collection of biographies of the Archbishops of Canterbury. It mentions that Tremellius was converted to Christianity in the household of Reginald Pole, a cardinal and later Archbishop of Canterbury. Pole and another man, Antonio Flaminio, baptized Tremellius. Both sources are problematic because they lack specific dates and locations, and their authors are unknown. However, they are still considered reliable because the information is secondary to the main purpose of the works, and there is no clear moral victor in either account. The events were also within living memory, so they would have been challenged if they were too far from the truth. To reconcile these sources, it seems that Tremellius's conversion was a gradual process. The encounter with Farnese likely happened first, in the early 1530s, in Rome. Farnese was known for his interest in church reform and his sympathetic attitude towards Jews. He might have seen Tremellius as a valuable Hebraist and helped draw him towards Christianity. Later, Tremellius likely spent time in Padua, where he was exposed to various reformist ideas. Padua was a center of Protestant thought, and the University of Padua was a haven for reformers. The Benedictine monastery of Santa Justina also influenced religious thinking, emphasizing salvation by faith and grace. Venice, with its tolerant government and thriving printing industry, also played a role in spreading these ideas. The final stage of Tremellius's conversion probably took place in Viterbo, where Pole was appointed governor in 1541. Flaminio, who joined Pole's circle around this time, was also present. Tremellius was baptized by Pole and Flaminio, marking the culmination of his gradual transition from Judaism to Christianity. This gradual process aligns with the idea that conversions are often not sudden but a result of prolonged exposure to new ideas and influences. In the 1500s, a young man named Tremellius was influenced by the religious and intellectual currents in Padua and Venice, which helped shape his journey towards Christianity. One of the most significant figures in his spiritual development was Cardinal Reginald Pole. Pole was a complex and controversial figure, often seen as a bridge between Catholic and Protestant thought. He read a lot of Protestant works, but also valued the authority of the Catholic Church. This ambiguity in his beliefs made him a unique mentor for Tremellius, who was also navigating the complex religious landscape of the time. Pole's circle included other influential figures like Marcantonio Flaminio, who had connections to the Spanish religious reformer Juan de Valdez. Valdez was a key figure in the Italian Reform movement, known for his deep spirituality and personal piety. He emphasized the importance of inner faith over external rituals, which resonated with many, including Tremellius. In 1541, Tremellius left Pole's company and moved to Lucca, where he joined the monastery of San Frediano. The prior of the monastery, Peter Martyr Vermigli, was another significant figure in Tremellius's life. Martyr, like Pole, was influenced by Valdez and the broader reform movements. He brought a mix of Catholic and Protestant ideas to the monastery, creating a unique educational and spiritual environment. Tremellius taught Hebrew there, working alongside other scholars like Paolo Lucchesi, Massimiliano, Celso Martinenghi, and Girolamo Zanchi. During his time in Lucca, Tremellius was exposed to a range of religious ideas, including the teachings of Protestant reformers like Martin Luther and John Calvin. The environment at San Frediano was one of intellectual and spiritual exploration, where the focus was on personal faith and the study of the Bible. This environment helped Tremellius deepen his understanding of Christianity and eventually led him to leave the Catholic Church, along with many others from the monastery. In conclusion, Tremellius's journey to Christianity was shaped by the complex and diverse religious currents of the 1500s. The influence of Cardinal Pole, the teachings of Juan de Valdez, and the reform-minded environment at San Frediano in Lucca all played crucial roles in his spiritual development. These experiences prepared him for a more radical shift in his beliefs, leading him to embrace a form of Christianity that combined elements of both Catholic and Protestant thought.